Hey guys, what's up? I'm Erin and welcome back to the channel. America is often talked about with reference to the middle class and in more recent times, the shrinking of the middle class. If you think about it, are you a low, middle, or high income earner? Maybe that question isn't so simple to answer because maybe you don't know where those cutoff points are. Well, I can tell you after doing the research, my husband and I in our household, we are in that middle, upper middle category. It's not really all that surprising because he's in the military and I hold a management position, so we have pretty typical everyday jobs. The American middle class still makes up a very slim majority of the American population, coming in at 52%. And as it turns out, there is merit to all of those headlines about the shrinking of the American middle class. Back in the 1970s, 61% of Americans were classified as being in the middle class, and each decade those numbers have declined steadily. Each decade the middle class has lost a few percentage points, hitting an all-time low of 50% in 2015. So that does mean the middle class grew from 2015 to today, where it sits at 52%. But make no mistake about it, the trend is still shrinking. It's important to note that the middle class is shrinking because people are falling into the lower class based on income, as well as graduating up to the upper class, albeit just in smaller numbers. These migrations are indicative of the growing polarization of wealth in America. More people find themselves at the lower end of the spectrum as well as at the higher end of the spectrum. The lower income category has gone from 16% in the 1970s to 20% today. The upper income category, well, that's grown from 4% all the way up to 9% of our population, more than doubling. And the upper middle income category, well, that's grown too, going from 10% all the way up to 12%. So the shrinking middle class isn't an indicator of the nation's wealth as a whole shrinking, but rather it's an indicator of the growing disparity in wealth distribution in the nation. What's more, the middle class isn't simply shrinking in size, they're also seeing their share of the American earned income shrink. For instance, back in 1970, the middle class earned 62% of all income earned in America. However, today, that figure has shrunk to just 43%. The shrinking of the middle class should be concerning because the middle class is what drives our economy. The lower income earning families often don't have enough discretionary income to spend on much beyond their necessities. And as far as the wealthiest families in America, well, they spend a disproportionately smaller share of their income. Often their income is so great that they really don't need to spend much of it to meet all of their wants and their needs. So they end up being super savers without really even trying. And saving does not drive our economy. Spending and capitalism does. So it's really that middle class who end up spending that greater share of their discretionary income driving our economy forward. The middle class also largely demand and fund infrastructure and provide human capital. They need highways and public schools. They often can't just opt to send their children to private schools because of cost, whereas the wealthy can. As far as human capital goes, they become skilled in a profession where they then take those skills and apply them in the workforce where they earn an income. And actively sources of earned income are taxed more heavily than passive sources of income. And comparatively, the wealthy have more sources of passive streams of income than active streams of income. So naturally, the question for many becomes, what class am I in? Well, as with most things in life and in finance, there isn't one straight, clear-cut answer, but we do have a general guidepost. Pew researchers define the American middle class as those earning 2/3 to double the American median household income. So with this standard, the middle class would be those earning roughly $42,000 to $126,000 a year. Lower income households would be those earning less than $42,000 a year, and the upper income bracket would be those making more than $126,000 a year. Easy enough, right? Well, not so fast. Location plays a huge factor because, say, $60,000 in Missouri is going to buy you a very different life than, say, $60,000 in New York City. And because we often tend to live and work and surround ourselves with people who earn similar incomes to us, it can often be hard for us to accurately judge what class we're in. According to a report by Urban Institute, people tend to live in communities with similar incomes. They view themselves as being near the middle because their neighbors' circumstances are similar to their own, even if their incomes are significantly below or above the US median. But if you still want a more concrete answer to that question on where you stand, Pew Research has a calculator on their website, and I will link it down below, where you can type in your state, your income, and even filter by race and education level if you're so inclined, and they will tell you if you are in the lower, middle, or upper class based on your income. And there's more to determining economic class than simply income level. There are two other factors to consider. There's social capital as well as cultural capital. Have you ever heard the saying, it's not what you know, it's who you know? Well, that is social capital at its finest. This is the group that you are socializing with, your circle of friends, the connections you are able to make. And we all know who you know has the power to open many doors in life. And if you don't have those people in the know, often you aren't fortunate enough to have these doors easily opened for you. Cultural capital is a little bit harder to nail down. This is how you present yourself, how you speak, how you behave, how you dress, your education level, as well as your skill set. For instance, we all knowingly and sometimes unknowingly judge people based on how they present themselves. Do they speak in polished prose, or are they using a bunch of slang words? How you present yourself can absolutely affect the opportunities that you are afforded. It's also worth mentioning that once you have one form of capital, income, social, or cultural, it is easier to acquire other forms. For instance, having discretionary income can enable you to pursue a higher education degree or buy nicer clothes. Or it could also give you the opportunity to join a country club where you're able to network with others who also have a larger amount of discretionary income. They kind of build on each other. There's also a recent argument that perhaps the lower, middle, upper class system of looking at America isn't the best way to go about it. There's been a recent argument saying that we should approach it more from an 80-20 standpoint. When looking at those who make up the lower 80% of our nation's income earners, we can see that over the past 40 years, their income has risen only 42%. However, the next richest 19% have seen their incomes rise by 70%. The richest 1%, well, during that time, they've seen their incomes increase by 192%. So perhaps the focus shouldn't be solely on the top 1%, but more so on the upper tier when it comes to looking at income disparities. Those in the top 20% seemingly start at a household income of $112,000 per year. They've seen their wages and their investments grow, and they're enjoying the comforts of living at or near the top. No matter how you look at it, America's middle class is important to the well-being of our nation. And one of the key markers of being in the middle class is having disposable income. And although I know it doesn't help push the economy forward, I still recommend if you have disposable income, be a super saver. It's good for you. Maybe not the economy, but it's still good for you. And most people aren't going to be super savers anyhow. Well, that's going to do it for me today, guys. I post new videos every single week. If you're new here, please hit the subscribe button. If you got anything at all out of this video, please give it a like or consider sharing with a friend, as it really does help the channel. I hope you have a good one, and I'll see you next week. Bye. As far as human capital goals, there you go. You just heard my Uber come out. We are more apt to have more sources of, it was so close, goals. But we do have a general guidepost. Oh my gosh. As far as human capital goes, I can't even say it now. I can't get past the goes. Don't you know? Pew researchers, with people who earn similar incomes to us. There's also two other factors.